I will never forget the night my stepfather locked both my mother and me inside the small dark room. His voice was loud like thunder, and his fists hit the wooden door so hard that I thought it would break. My mother was holding me tight, shaking like a leaf, tears rolling down her face. I could feel her heartbeat racing against mine. "Both of you will listen to me," he shouted from outside. "No one leaves this house without my say." That was the moment I realized he was not only hurting my mother but me too. He had already slapped me earlier that evening when I tried to protect her. The sting on my cheek was still burning. My mother tried to stop him, but he turned on her as well. His cruelty did not stop with her. It reached me, and in that moment we were both his prisoners. I thought he would break down the door and hurt us again, but then suddenly the noise stopped. The silence was heavy, and we did not know what would happen next. My mother whispered in my ear, "Stay quiet. Maybe he will leave." But I could hear his footsteps still moving around the house. He was waiting. That was not the beginning of his abuse. It had started long before that night. But that was the night everything changed, when I truly saw how dangerous he was, and how much power he thought he had over us. Now let me tell you how it all began. My mother was a kind woman. She had soft eyes and a warm smile, even though life had never been easy for her. She met my stepfather after my real father left us when I was very young. First, my stepfather seemed like a gift. He was gentle, charming, and always willing to help. He bought us little presents, carried heavy bags for my mother, and told her she deserved to be happy again. I remember the first day he moved into our home. My mother cooked a big meal to celebrate, and she looked so joyful, as if the sadness she carried had finally been lifted. I wanted to believe he was good too. For a short time I did. But little by little things started to change. His voice grew louder, his eyes colder. He would decide what food we ate, what clothes we wore, and even when we could laugh. My mother would often stay quiet, nodding her head just to avoid a fight. I could see the fear growing in her, even if she tried to hide it from me. One evening when my mother was washing dishes, he grabbed my arm hard because I had not cleaned my room fast enough. His grip hurt so much that I cried. My mother rushed over, begging him to let me go, but instead of calming down, he pushed her against the wall. I had never seen her look so helpless. That was the first time I realized we were both in danger. The days after that were like walking on broken glass. We never knew when his anger would explode. Sometimes he was nice, laughing and acting like everything was normal. Other times a small mistake, like spilling a glass of water, would make him scream for hours. I began to hate the sound of his footsteps. Each time I heard them, my stomach twisted with fear. My mother tried to shield me, but she could not always protect me. She was trapped too. Still, there were small moments of hope. My grandmother visited once, and for those few days, he pretended to be gentle. He smiled at us, helped with chores, and even gave me a small toy. But the moment Grandma left, the mask fell off, and the cruelty returned. One night, when rain was pouring hard on the roof, the abuse reached a peak. He forced both my mother and me to kneel in the living room for hours, shouting insults at us for things we didn't even do. My knees ached, and my mother's tears dropped silently onto the floor. That was when I understood. He was not only trying to control her, he was trying to break both of us. I looked at my mother, and she looked back at me. In her eyes, I saw pain, but I also saw something else, a silent promise that one day we would escape him. But that day was still far away. Because that very night, something even worse happened that changed everything. That night, after he made us kneel for hours, his anger grew even darker. He threw a glass against the wall, and the sharp pieces scattered across the floor. My mother tried to calm him, but he shouted at her to stay quiet. Then he turned his eyes on me. "You think you can protect her?" he barked, pointing at my mother. "You're just a child. You both belong to me." He stepped closer and I froze. My mother quickly pulled me behind her, standing like a shield. "Please," she begged, "don't touch her." For a moment, everything was silent except for the sound of rain hitting the roof. Then, as suddenly as his anger had flared, he stormed out of the room, leaving us trembling in fear. We could hear the front door slam and the house shook. That was one of the longest nights of my life. My mother and I sat close together on the floor until dawn, too afraid to sleep. She whispered to me, "One day we will be free." I wanted to believe her, but at that moment freedom felt like a dream too far away. The next morning he acted as if nothing had happened. He made breakfast, humming to himself, and even smiled at us. But the bruises on my mother's arms and the fear in my chest reminded me of the truth. His kindness was only another mask, one he wore when he wanted to trick us into thinking he had changed. At school I tried to act normal. My teacher asked why I looked so tired, but I just shook my head. I was too afraid to tell anyone the truth. What if he found out? What if things got worse? I kept my pain locked inside. Life with him was like walking through a storm. Some days were calm and we almost forgot the danger. But then the storm would return, fiercer than before. He controlled everything: what we ate, when we spoke, even who we could see. Friends stopped visiting because he made the house feel unwelcoming. My mother lost touch with her old life, and so did I. But despite the fear, there were moments that gave us a little strength. Sometimes, late at night, my mother would whisper stories about her past, about how she grew up, about my real father, about dreams she once had. Those stories made me believe there was still a world outside our prison. Then one afternoon, something happened that shook us again. He came home earlier than usual, and his face was twisted with rage. He accused my mother of speaking to someone on the phone behind his back. My mother denied it, but he wouldn't listen. He grabbed the phone, smashed it against the floor, and shouted, "You both will never speak to anyone without my permission." I stood frozen, watching the pieces of the phone scatter like broken hope. My mother tried to stand tall, but I could see her legs shaking. And then, without warning, he turned toward me. His eyes were wild, and he raised his hand high. My heart pounded, and I could feel the fear rising in my throat. That was the moment I realized the storm was about to strike me directly, harder than ever before. His hand came down fast, and before I could move, the slap landed across my face. The sound echoed in the room like a gunshot. My cheek burned and tears filled my eyes, but I refused to cry out loud. My mother screamed, rushing to shield me, but he shoved her aside. "Do not protect her," he roared. "She must learn who is in charge here." I held my breath, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would break my chest. My mother crawled to me, wrapping her arms around me, but he towered above us both like a dark shadow. For a long moment I thought he would strike again. But instead he stepped back, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. Then, in a voice that was cold and sharp, he said, "From now on, both of you will obey me without question. If you don't, you will pay the price." He walked away, leaving us broken on the floor. My mother held me tightly, whispering, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Her tears fell on my face, and I realized she was blaming herself for what he did. The days that followed were filled with silence. My mother spoke less, and I felt myself shrinking inside, like a flower without sunlight. School became my only escape, though even there, I carried the weight of fear. I couldn't tell my friends what was happening. Who would believe me? To everyone else, he was charming, smiling, and respectable. No one knew the monster that lived behind closed doors. But even in that darkness, I held on to small bits of hope. Sometimes, when he left for work, my mother and I would breathe easier. We would sit together, talk softly, or just hold hands. In those quiet hours, we remembered what peace felt like. It gave us strength to survive the storm when it returned. One Sunday, after church, my mother dared to visit Grandma without telling him. For the first time in months, I saw her smile fully, her eyes shining as she hugged her mother. Grandma looked at me closely and asked if everything was all right. I wanted to tell her the truth, to scream for help, but fear tied my tongue. I only nodded. But happiness never lasted long. When we returned home, he was already waiting, his face dark with suspicion. He asked where we had been, and when my mother told him the truth, his expression twisted with fury. "You went without asking me?" he shouted. "You think you can make choices on your own?" He grabbed a chair and threw it across the room. The crash made me jump, and my mother pulled me behind her once again. His anger was like a fire that would not stop burning. That night, as I lay in bed, my heart heavy with fear, I prayed silently for a way out. I prayed that someone would see the truth. But instead of rescue, something even worse was about to happen. Because one evening when the house was quiet, I heard his footsteps outside my door. Slow, heavy, coming closer. The door creaked open, and the darkness swallowed me whole. The door creaked open and I froze under my blanket. My breath caught in my throat as his shadow stretched across the room. The darkness felt heavier, as if it was pressing down on me, making it hard to breathe. My heart beat so loudly that I was afraid he could hear it. His footsteps came closer, slow and heavy, each one making the wooden floor groan. I could smell the strong scent of alcohol on him even from where I lay. He stopped beside my bed and for a moment, there was silence so deep that I thought time had stopped. Then his voice cut through the stillness, low and cold. "You will not defy me," he said. "You and your mother belong to me. Don't forget that." I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just kept my eyes tightly shut, praying he would leave. My hands trembled under the blanket, but I forced myself to stay as still as possible. He stood there for what felt like forever, watching me, breathing heavily, as if waiting for me to make a sound. Then at last he turned and walked away. The door shut slowly, and his footsteps faded into the hallway. I stayed frozen long after he left, too afraid to move, too afraid even to cry. A few minutes later, my mother slipped quietly into my room. Her face was pale and her eyes were wide with fear. She hugged me tightly and whispered, "Don't worry, he won't hurt you tonight." But her voice shook and I could tell she was lying. She was just trying to comfort me, but inside she was as scared as I was. That night I didn't sleep at all. I kept staring at the ceiling, listening to every sound in the house, waiting for him to come back. The next morning, he acted as though nothing had happened. He sat at the table, sipping his tea, and told us to sit with him. His eyes looked normal, even calm, but I knew the storm inside him was still there. My mother and I obeyed quietly, keeping our heads down, answering only when he asked questions. I hated how we had to pretend everything was fine, as if the fear from the night before didn't exist. At school, my teacher asked again why I looked so tired. She asked if something was wrong at home, but I couldn't tell her. My stepfather's voice echoed in my head. "You belong to me. If I told anyone, what if he found out? What if he hurt my mother even more?" I bit my tongue and said I was fine, even though inside I was screaming for help. Days passed and the house felt like a cage. He grew more controlling, deciding what we ate, when we slept, even how long we could sit together in the living room. Sometimes, he locked the doors from the inside, making sure no one could come in or out without his permission. My mother's smile faded more each day, replaced by a tired emptiness. I tried to make her laugh sometimes, telling little jokes or drawing funny pictures, but she only forced a weak smile before her eyes filled with tears again. Still, there were moments that gave us a little hope. One afternoon when he was at work, my mother and I sat by the window, watching children play outside. For the first time in a long while, she told me stories about when she was a little girl. She spoke of running barefoot in the fields, climbing trees and laughing with her sisters. For those few minutes she looked alive again, her eyes shining with a light I thought I had lost forever. I wanted to hold on to that moment forever, but as soon as I heard his car pull up outside, the light in her eyes vanished and the fear returned. His anger was like a storm that never ended. Sometimes it was small, just angry words, but other times it was violent, like thunder crashing down. One night, he came home angry because his boss had scolded him. He shouted at my mother for not cooking the food fast enough. Then threw the plate against the wall. Pieces of the plate scattered across the floor, and he made me pick them up. My hands shook so badly that one of the sharp pieces cut my finger, and blood began to drip. I cried quietly, holding my finger, but he only shouted louder. "Stop your whining. You're weak, just like your mother." My mother rushed to me, wrapping my finger in a piece of cloth, but he shoved her away again. It was always the same. Whenever she tried to protect me, he turned his anger on her. The bruises on her arms grew darker with each passing week, and her spirit seemed to break more every day. I began to wonder if we would ever escape. Sometimes I thought about running away, but where would we go? We had no money, no phone, no safe place. He had cut us off from everyone, even Grandma. My mother whispered once, "If we run, he will find us." That thought haunted me. I felt trapped, like a bird with broken wings. Yet deep inside me, a small flame of hope refused to die. I began to write in a little notebook I kept hidden under my mattress. I wrote down my fears, my prayers, my dreams of a life without him. Writing gave me strength, even though I knew he would be furious if he ever found it. That notebook became my secret friend, the only place I could speak freely. Then came the night that changed everything again. It was late, and I was lying in bed when I heard shouting from the kitchen. My mother was pleading with him about something. I crept quietly to the doorway and peeked out. He was waving his arms wildly, his face red with rage. My mother stood against the wall, her hands trembling. "You think you can disobey me?" he shouted. "You will regret this." Before I could even move, he grabbed her by the hair and dragged her across the floor. My mother screamed, and my heart stopped. I wanted to rush in to fight him, but fear froze me in place. I covered my mouth with my hands to keep from crying out. He threw her against the wall, and she crumpled to the ground. I couldn't stay hidden anymore. I ran forward shouting, "Stop. Leave her alone." He turned to me, his eyes burning with fury. For a second, I thought he would strike me again. But instead he grabbed me by the wrist and yanked me forward. His grip was so tight I felt like my bones would snap. My mother crawled toward us, begging him to let me go, but he pushed her back with his foot. "You both belong to me," he snarled. "Neither of you will escape. If you even try, you will regret it." He dragged me toward the small storage room at the back of the house. My mother screamed, clawing at his arm, but he shoved her aside once again. He threw me inside the dark room and slammed the door shut. I heard the key turn in the lock. My fists pounded against the door as I cried, "Let me out, please." But the only sound was his footsteps walking away. I sank to the cold floor, my chest heaving with sobs. I felt like the walls were closing in on me, trapping me in his darkness. Hours passed, or maybe minutes, I couldn't tell. Time felt twisted in that small, airless space. I thought I would never get out. Then, at last, I heard the key turn again. The door opened, and my mother rushed in, her face streaked with tears. She hugged me tightly, whispering, "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." She helped me to my feet, and we sat together on the floor, holding each other as if our lives depended on it. But just as I thought the worst was over, I heard his voice from the hallway, cold and sharp. "This is only the beginning," he said. "Next time it will be worse." My mother's arms tightened around me, and I felt her body shaking. I knew then that the storm was far from over, and the next wave of his cruelty was already on its way. His voice echoed in my ears long after he left the hallway. "This is only the beginning. Next time it will be worse." Those words crawled into my mind and stayed there like poison. My mother held me close, rocking me gently, but her tears betrayed her. She was just as afraid as I was. That night, neither of us slept. We stayed huddled together on my small bed, listening for his footsteps. Every creak of the house, every sigh of the wind outside made us jump. It felt like we were living inside a nightmare that had no end. In the morning, he acted as though nothing had happened. He sat at the table, reading the newspaper, and told my mother to make him breakfast. His voice was calm, almost cheerful, but that only made it scarier. We both knew what he was capable of, and the quiet after his storm was often the most dangerous part. At school, I felt like a ghost. My classmates laughed and played, but I couldn't join them. My body was in the classroom, but my heart was trapped back in that dark room. My teacher asked if I was okay again, but I forced a smile and said yes. Nobody knew the truth. Nobody could see the bruises on my soul. At home, my mother tried to act normal too. She cleaned, cooked, and obeyed his every word, hoping to avoid another outburst. But I could see the fear in her eyes. I could see how hard she was fighting just to survive each day. Sometimes, when he wasn't looking, she would squeeze my hand gently as if to say, "Stay strong. Don't give up." Those small moments gave me a little hope, but the fear always came rushing back. One evening, he came home in an unusually good mood. He brought a bag of sweets and gave me one. "See," he said with a smile. "I can be kind too." I took it slowly, my hands shaking. His kindness felt like a trap, a game he was playing to make us lower our guard. My mother forced a smile, but her eyes stayed cold and distant. She knew what I knew. His good moods never lasted long. And she was right. A few nights later, the storm returned. He accused my mother of hiding money from him. She swore she hadn't, but he didn't believe her. He overturned the kitchen table, sending plates crashing to the floor. My mother tried to reason with him, but he slapped her so hard she fell. I screamed and ran to her, but he grabbed me by the arm and pulled me away. "Don't get in the middle," he shouted. His grip was like iron, leaving bruises on my skin. My mother crawled to me, sobbing, but he pushed her back again. Then he locked us both in the storage room this time, slamming the door and leaving us in the dark. We stayed there for hours, holding each other, crying quietly. My stomach growled with hunger, and the air felt heavy and stale. My mother whispered, "One day we will escape. I promise." I wanted to believe her, but her promises were starting to feel like dreams, beautiful but impossible. When he finally let us out, his face was calm again. "You'll behave better now," he said. His words were soft, but they carried the weight of a threat. Days passed and the fear grew heavier. I noticed my mother spending more time staring out the window, as if she was searching for something, or someone to save us. I wondered if she was secretly planning an escape, but she never said anything out loud. It was too dangerous. Then came the night that ended all doubts about how far he would go. It was late, and we were sitting quietly in the living room. Suddenly he stood up, his face dark with anger. "I know you've been thinking about leaving me," he said, pointing at my mother. "Don't you dare. If you ever try, I will make sure you regret it." My mother froze, her lips trembling. I sat still, my hands gripping the edge of the chair. He stepped closer, his eyes burning with fury. "Do you understand me?" he roared. She nodded quickly, tears streaming down her face. But that wasn't enough for him. He grabbed a heavy glass bottle from the table and lifted it high, aiming it at her. My heart stopped. I screamed, "No," and rushed forward without thinking. The bottle came down fast, and everything went black. When I opened my eyes, the room was spinning. My head throbbed with pain, and I could feel something wet on my forehead. At first, I thought it was sweat, but when I touched it, my fingers came back red. Blood. I blinked slowly and saw my mother kneeling beside me, her face pale with terror. She was pressing a cloth against my head, whispering, "Stay with me, please stay with me." Tears rolled down her cheeks, dropping onto my face. Across the room, my stepfather stood with the broken bottle still in his hand. His chest rose and fell heavily as he glared at us. For a moment, I thought he would strike again. But then he dropped the bottle on the floor, the shards scattering like pieces of a nightmare. He walked away muttering, "You both made me do this." The sound of the front door slamming echoed through the house. He had left. My mother pulled me into her arms, sobbing, "I'm so sorry, my child. I should have protected you." Her hand shook as she held me, and I could feel her fear mixing with mine. My head ached, but I was alive. That was all that mattered. She cleaned the wound as best as she could, using water and an old cloth. We didn't dare go to the hospital. If anyone asked questions, he would find out, and then things would only get worse. So we stayed silent, hiding our pain inside the walls of our home. The days after that were slow and heavy. I felt dizzy sometimes, but I forced myself to go to school. At least there I could escape him for a few hours. But even at school I carried the weight of fear. I kept imagining his face, his voice, his anger. It followed me everywhere. Like a shadow I couldn't escape. My classmates laughed and played, but I couldn't join them. One of my friends asked why I always looked sad, but I just smiled weakly and said I was fine. The truth was too heavy to share. At home my mother became quieter. She moved like a ghost, always careful, always watching. I could see she was breaking inside, but she still tried to be strong for me. At night, when he was asleep, she whispered prayers into the darkness. "Please God, give us a way out." But the way out never came. Instead, his control grew stronger. He began checking the doors and windows every night, making sure they were locked. He demanded to know where we were at all times. If the phone rang, he answered it before my mother could. We were prisoners, trapped in our own home. Still, there were moments of quiet comfort. Sometimes, when he wasn't home, my mother and I would sit close together, sharing whispers and dreams. She told me again that one day we would escape, that one day we would be free. I held on to those words like a lifeline. But then came the night that reminded us freedom was still far away. He came home smelling of alcohol, his eyes wild and unfocused. He stumbled into the living room where my mother and I were sitting. Without a word, he overturned the table, sending everything crashing to the floor. "You think you can fool me?" he shouted. "I know you're planning something." My mother shook her head, her voice trembling. "No, we're not. Please calm down." But he didn't listen. He grabbed her by the arm and shook her violently. I screamed, trying to pull him away, but he pushed me to the ground. His rage filled the room like fire, and I knew something terrible was about to happen. He lifted his fist, aiming it at my mother's face, and at that very moment, there was a loud knock at the door. We all froze. The knock on the door was loud and sharp. My stepfather froze mid-swing, his fist still hanging in the air. My mother's breath caught in her throat, and I sat on the floor, staring wide-eyed at the door. The knock came again. "Is anyone home?" A voice called from outside. For a moment, silence filled the room. My stepfather's face twisted with suspicion. He lowered his fist slowly, then turned toward us. "Not a word," he hissed. His eyes were wild, his voice sharp like a knife. He straightened his shirt, wiped the anger off his face and walked to the door. When he opened it, he was suddenly all smiles. Standing outside was our neighbor, Mr. Carter, holding a basket of fruit. "Evening," Mr. Carter said cheerfully. "My wife sent these over. Thought you and your family might enjoy them." My stepfather chuckled, his voice calm and friendly. "Ah, thank you, Carter. That's very kind of you." From where I sat, I could see the smile on his face, but his hand was clenched tight around the doorknob. My mother quickly wiped her tears, pretending nothing was wrong. Mr. Carter glanced inside, his eyes pausing on me for a moment. I wondered if he could see the fear in my eyes, the redness of my mother's cheeks. But he said nothing. He just nodded and walked away. As soon as the door shut, my stepfather turned back to us, the smile gone, his face dark again. "Remember this," he whispered. "No one can save you. Not your neighbors, not anyone. You belong to me." He threw the basket of fruit onto the floor, and the apples rolled across the room. My mother and I stayed frozen, too afraid to move. That night, I lay in bed thinking about Mr. Carter. He had been so close, just on the other side of the door. If only I had shouted. If only I had told him the truth. But fear had tied my tongue. I hated myself for staying quiet, but I was terrified of what would happen if I spoke. The next few days were tense. My stepfather became more watchful, more controlling. He checked on us constantly, as if he suspected we might try to reach out for help. He made sure the windows stayed locked, and he even started hiding the house keys. We were trapped more than ever. But deep inside, something had changed in me. Seeing Mr. Carter that night lit a small flame of hope. Maybe, just maybe, someone would notice. Maybe someone would realize what was happening behind our closed doors. I began to imagine ways I could signal for help without my stepfather finding out. One afternoon while he was at work, I wrote a short note on a piece of paper. Said only 3 words, "Help us, please." I hid it under a rock near the garden gate, hoping that maybe Mr. Carter or his wife would see it. My heart pounded with fear as I tucked it away, but also with hope. That evening my stepfather came home early. His eyes scanned the room like he was searching for something out of place. My stomach churned as he walked past the window. Did he notice? Did he see the rock I had moved? He sat at the table and stared at us in silence. The room felt like it was holding its breath. Then slowly a smile spread across his face. A smile that made my blood run cold. "I know what you're up to," he said softly. My mother's eyes widened. I froze. What do you mean?" she stammered. He leaned back in his chair, his smile never fading. "You think you can fool me? You think you can reach out for help behind my back?" My heart stopped. Did he find the note? Did someone tell him? He slammed his fist on the table, making us both jump. "I warned you. There will be consequences." And then slowly, he stood up and walked toward the door. For a moment, I thought he was leaving. Relief washed over me, until he grabbed the keys from the hook and locked the front door from the inside. He turned back to us, his eyes burning with rage. "Tonight," he said, "you will both learn what happens when you betray me." The sound of the key turning in the lock echoed in my chest like a warning drum. My mother's hand reached for mine under the table, her fingers trembling as they closed around mine. My stepfather slipped the keys into his pocket and stood there, staring at us as if he already knew our every thought. "You both think you're smart," he said slowly, his voice steady but dangerous. "But you don't understand. This house is mine. Your lives are mine. There is no escape." He paced the room like a lion circling its prey. Every step he took made the floorboards groan. I could hear my own heartbeat, fast and loud, as if it wanted to leap out of my chest. My mother tried to speak. "Please, we didn't do anything." "Silence," he snapped, his voice cracking like a whip. He grabbed a chair and threw it against the wall, the wood splintering into pieces. I flinched so hard I nearly fell from my seat. He pointed at us. "From now on there will be rules. You don't speak unless I say so. You don't leave this house unless I say so. And if either of you ever tries to reach out for help again," his eyes narrowed, "you won't live to regret it." The words hit me like cold water. I could see my mother's face pale, her lips trembling as she nodded quickly. I wanted to scream, to fight back, but my voice was locked inside me. Fear had chained me to the chair. The rest of the night was heavy and silent. He sat in the living room, drinking, while my mother quietly cleaned the mess he had made. I helped her pick up the broken pieces of the chair, our hands brushing, both of us too afraid to speak. We didn't dare cry. We didn't dare make a sound. When I finally lay in bed, I stared at the ceiling, wondering if Mr. Carter or his wife had found the note, wondering if they knew we were in danger, wondering if they would come back. But the house stayed silent, except for the sound of his footsteps outside my door. The next few days dragged on like years. He locked the doors whenever he left for work and carried the keys with him. We couldn't step outside, not even to the garden. We were trapped in a prison built of walls and fear. Still, I held on to a tiny spark of hope. I thought about the note every day, praying someone had seen it. My mother whispered prayers at night, her voice soft and shaky, asking God for deliverance. Then one afternoon something happened. I was standing by the window, pretending to dust, when I saw Mrs. Carter outside watering her plants. She looked toward our house, her eyes lingering a little too long on the window where I stood. Our eyes met for a second, and she gave me the smallest nod before turning back to her garden. My heart raced. Had she seen the note? Did she know? That night, my stepfather came home later than usual. He was restless, pacing the house, checking every lock, every window. It was as if he sensed something was coming. And then just as we sat down to eat, there was another knock at the door. This time it wasn't friendly or polite. It was firm, demanding. My stepfather froze, his fork halfway to his mouth. My mother's eyes widened, and I felt my whole body go rigid. The knock came again, louder. "Open up," a voice called. My stepfather stood slowly, his face pale but furious. He walked to the door, his hand hovering over the knob, and then he turned back to us with a glare. "Not a word," he growled. He opened the door, and standing there were 2 police officers. The night the police came to our door changed everything. At first, my stepfather tried to act calm, greeting them with a fake smile the way he always did with neighbors. But this time the officers didn't just hand him a basket of fruit or walk away. They asked to come inside. When they stepped into the living room, their eyes moved over the broken chair, the scattered fruit stains still on the wall, and the fear written all over my mother's and my face. My stepfather kept talking, lying about how we were fine and how nothing was wrong. But one of the officers looked me straight in the eyes and asked softly, "Are you safe here?" For the first time I didn't look down. My lips trembled, but I shook my head slowly. My mother reached for my hand and whispered, "No, we're not." That was all it took. The officer stepped forward, and my stepfather's mask cracked. He shouted, he threatened, but they held him back. The sound of the handcuffs clicking shut was like chains breaking off our lives. For the first time in years, the house felt lighter. After that night, things weren't easy, but they were better. We stayed with Mr. and Mrs. Carter for a while, and for the first time we felt safe. My mother cried a lot, but they were tears of relief. I cried too, but mine were mixed with hope. Slowly we started to heal. I went back to school without the heavy fear that had once followed me like a shadow. My mother smiled more, even though her heart was still bruised. We talked, we prayed, and we promised each other that silence would never be our prison again. Looking back now, I realized something important. Keeping quiet only gave my stepfather more power. Fear trapped us, but speaking out, finally telling the truth, set us free. So to anyone who feels trapped like we once were, I want you to know this. Silence is the abuser's weapon. But your voice, no matter how small or shaky, can break chains. There are people out there who will listen, people who will help. Never give up hope. Because hope was what saved me and my mother. And hope is what can save you too.